It was meant to be a normal night. Tracy Ocasio went out to watch a basketball game at her favorite bar in Ocoee, Florida. She was 27, full of dreams, and had every intention of going home after the game. But something changed that night. She met a man she didn't know well. She gave him a ride. And after that, she disappeared. The next day, her phone was off. Her car was found, left behind on a quiet, dark street. But Tracy was nowhere to be found. What really happened that night? And who was the last person to see her? Tracy Ocasio came into the world in 1982, born to Elizabeth, affectionately known as Liz, and Joseph Ocasio in the quiet town of Ocoee, Florida. From the very start, Tracy had a special connection with her father and was proudly known as a daddy's girl. Her heart was full of ambition and curiosity. She dreamed of pursuing a career in radiology and had an undeniable love for animals. Her pets ranged from scorpions and lizards to a fluffy cat named Cookie. Tracy also had a creative side. She loved crafting handmade jewelry during her downtime and often immersed herself in books, especially stories rooted in history and ancient civilizations like World War II and Rome. The Ocasio household was tightly knit. Tracy, even when out for the day, never failed to call her mom, keeping her updated on the little details of her life. After finishing high school, she picked up work as a waitress at a nearby restaurant while also enrolling in online college classes to chase her academic goals. At one point, Tracy left home to start a new chapter with her fiancé. But the engagement didn't last, and she eventually moved back in with her parents, a change they welcomed with open arms. Despite the setback, life at home was good, and she leaned on the comfort of family. Sports, particularly basketball, were something she and her dad deeply bonded over. The Orlando Magic was their team, and watching games together became a cherished ritual that Tracy never skipped. By age 27, Tracy was living a full and hopeful life. She had goals, strong family ties, and a clear sense of direction. But then came the day that changed everything. On May 26, 2009, Tracy was excited for the Orlando Magic playoff game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Originally, she had planned to watch it with her dad, but he had to run an unexpected work errand. So, Tracy decided to head to the Florida Tap Room on Raleigh Street by herself, a bar she frequented and where she knew many of the regulars. Packed with fellow basketball fans, it was a familiar and safe space for her. That night, she watched the game surrounded by cheers and energy. But after the final buzzer, something went wrong. Tracy never came home. Liz grew anxious when she didn't hear from her daughter after the game, especially since Tracy was always in touch. Even more concerning was the fact that Tracy had told her she planned to return home immediately after the game. Hours passed, calls went unanswered, and just like that, Tracy had vanished. The next day, her family filed a missing person report and the search began. Investigators turned to the last place she was seen, the Florida Tap Room. Surveillance footage from the bar provided a crucial clue. Tracy had been captured on camera leaving around 1 to 1:30 a.m. She wasn't alone. A bald man, roughly her age, was seen with her. They appeared to be enjoying themselves, chatting comfortably before walking out together. Neither Liz nor Joseph recognized the man. Tracy was wearing black jeans, a tank top, a hooded jacket, and a green and white hat that night. There was no sign of distress in the footage. She appeared alert and left willingly. Still, the identity of the man became the top lead for investigators. While they searched for him, a new development emerged. On the evening of May 27th, Tracy's yellow 2002 two-door Chevrolet Cobalt was discovered parked on Franklin Street in Ocoee. It was the same car she had driven to the bar the night before. The vehicle was left unlocked in a dark, isolated area. No streetlights, no traffic, no sign of life. It looked clearly abandoned. Inside, there were no personal belongings, no bag, no phone, nothing. The only detail that caught investigators' attention was that both front seats were reclined forward, as if someone had recently accessed the back seat or tried to help someone get in or out. That behavior didn't align with Tracy's habits. First off, she rarely used the back seat of her two-door car. It was cramped and not ideal for an adult. If she had anything with her, it likely would have been stored in the trunk. Adding to the concern, her father Joseph made it clear. Tracy hated dark areas and would have never willingly parked in such a spot unless she had no choice. So, the question loomed. Why was her car left there? The answer came swiftly. The man seen with Tracy on the night of May 26th was finally identified. His name was James Hadaway. Detectives reached out to him, and surprisingly, he was open to talking. James explained that he met Tracy at the Florida Tap Room. They chatted during the game, and afterward, he asked her for a ride since he didn't have a car. According to him, Tracy dropped him off and drove away. But here's where things got strange. Tracy's car had been found just a few yards from James's home, where he lived with his father. Now, not only was James the last person to see Tracy, but her abandoned car was basically on his doorstep. Suspicion grew fast. Investigators dug into Tracy's phone data. Her phone had shut off around 8:30 a.m. on May 27th, the morning after the game. And the last pinged location? Right where her car had been found. That gave police just enough cause to get a search warrant for James's house. Inside, there was no sign of Tracy, no clues, no items of hers, but there was a large amount of drugs. As it turned out, James had been using drugs while out on bond, which led to his arrest. And that's when more disturbing information came to light. James had a long criminal history, including charges related to juvenile kidnapping. Not long after his arrest, two witnesses stepped forward, friends of James, who said they'd seen him leave the bar that night with a woman matching Tracy's description. One even claimed Tracy went into James's home and hung out there briefly. James had allegedly encouraged her to try drugs, but she refused. After that, she reportedly left. That directly contradicted James's earlier claim that she had only dropped him off. His story was unraveling. Though he wasn't charged in connection with Tracy's disappearance, James was now in custody and unable to flee. Meanwhile, detectives poured all available resources into finding Tracy. They brought in bloodhounds and cadaver dogs, but oddly, the dogs couldn't even detect her scent in her own car. As police continued their investigation, Tracy's father took matters into his own hands. Joseph plastered flyers across Ocoee, searching parks, streets, and abandoned lots, anywhere his daughter might have ended up. With no progress, the family reached out to Tim Miller, the founder of Texas EquuSearch, for help. Volunteers combed over 2,500 acres of land, but there was still no sign of Tracy. All the while, detectives kept questioning James. Though he remained tight-lipped about Tracy, they had growing suspicions. At this point, nearly a month had passed since her disappearance. Digging further into James Hadaway's background revealed a deeply troubling history. He had been in and out of trouble from a young age. Drug abuse, random jobs, shady activities like helping his father dredge ponds and illegally dump debris. He was already facing charges, but as he stood trial, new layers of his past emerged. People who knew James came forward with disturbing stories. One common thread was his sudden mood shifts. He could flip from friendly to violent without warning. Several women shared experiences of feeling unsafe around him. Then came the most chilling account, one that mirrored Tracy's case almost exactly. Nearly a year before Tracy vanished, another woman named Rachel Clark had agreed to give James a ride home. As they said goodbye, James embraced her, then snapped. He violently attacked Rachel, tackling her to the ground and whispering, "Don't make me kill you." She fought back, screaming, until a stranger passing by intervened and scared James off. Rachel survived, but she was left with severe bruising, scratches, and trauma. Her account was a haunting echo of Tracy's last known moments with James. Though no charges were filed against James in Tracy's case at the time, he had become the prime suspect. His lies, criminal history, proximity to Tracy's abandoned car, and violent past made him the center of the investigation. What made things even more maddening was the fact that James Hadaway was never charged for his brutal attack on Rachel Clark. She had filed a police report, but by the time detectives tried to locate him, he had seemingly vanished until nearly a year later when he resurfaced as the main suspect in Tracy's disappearance. Once James was back on the radar, investigators reopened Rachel's case. They were determined to keep him behind bars, especially now that they strongly suspected he was involved in Tracy's vanishing. Meanwhile, the search for Tracy continued. Then, something unexpected happened, something just as disturbing as her disappearance. On February 22, 2011, almost 2 years after Tracy went missing, detectives were searching Lake Carter, which had mostly dried up. During the search, they discovered what appeared to be human remains. First, they found part of a spine and a skull. As the lake continued to drain, more bones emerged. 2 days later, on February 24th, authorities also recovered a wallet, an ID card, and a cell phone nearby. The name on the ID, Christopher George. This wasn't the breakthrough detectives expected. They were hoping to find answers about Tracy, and instead, they stumbled upon a completely different individual. But who was Chris George? As it turned out, Chris and Tracy didn't know each other, but there was someone who did have a connection to both: James Hadaway. DNA confirmed the remains belonged to Chris. That added a new layer to the case, and police began looking into the possible link between him and James. Around that time, multiple tips were pouring in. One particularly chilling call was made anonymously to Tracy's father. The caller claimed to know a woman who had acted as an accomplice to James, and according to her, James had been involved in 3 separate homicides in the Orlando area. The tipster also said that the bodies, along with the murder weapons, were dumped in local lakes. That claim was the driving force behind the lake searches. While the tip could have been bogus, detectives couldn't afford to ignore it, especially with James's violent history. Eventually, they discovered that Chris had last been seen with James and another individual in early February 2009, which was shortly after James assaulted Rachel but before Tracy vanished. Chris, who lived in Apopka, had been reported missing on February 11, 2009. Witnesses told police they had seen James and another man walking out of a wooded area, acting strangely. A patrol officer had even stopped them that night. When questioned, James told the officer that his friend Chris was high and needed help. The officer let them go without further investigation. Not long after, Chris's vehicle was found abandoned at Lake Carter, the same place where his remains and belongings were later recovered. When authorities confirmed Chris's identity, they contacted his family. The George and the Ocasios, though complete strangers, found an unfortunate connection through tragedy. Both families were devastated and united by their shared grief, desperate to see justice done. Unfortunately, Chris's autopsy results were inconclusive due to advanced decomposition. No official cause of death could be determined. While James's presence at the scene raised serious concerns, there wasn't enough physical evidence to charge him in connection with Chris's death. But detectives weren't giving up. They knew they had a strong case in Rachel's assault, and that's where they decided to begin. At the time, James was sitting in Seminole County Jail on unrelated charges. But now, with Rachel's testimony and physical evidence, they were ready to take him to court. In May 2011, the trial for the attempted murder of Rachel Clark began. The centerpiece of the prosecution was Rachel herself. With remarkable strength, she took the stand and recounted in vivid detail how James had turned on her the night she gave him a ride. Her description of the attack was chilling, how he suddenly snapped, tackled her to the ground, and began violently assaulting her while whispering threats. James sat in court with a blank expression, listening as his actions were laid bare. His defense team argued that he had been drunk and incoherent, with no recollection of what happened that night. They tried to shift focus, suggesting the incident had been a misunderstanding caused by substance abuse. But then the jury was shown photos of Rachel's injuries, her bruised neck, scratched arms, and battered face. The impact was immediate and undeniable. The courtroom fell silent. The horror of her ordeal left a lasting impression on everyone present. And with that, the case against James Hadaway took a darker and more damning turn. It was clear to everyone in the courtroom this wasn't the result of drunken confusion or a heat-of-the-moment mistake. The attack on Rachel Clark had been deliberate, violent, and terrifying. After a tense deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. James Hadaway was found guilty of attempted murder, along with burglary, robbery, and false imprisonment. The sentence was life in prison. As the judge read the decision, the courtroom seemed to collectively exhale. After the sentencing, James stood and addressed the court, offering an apology to Rachel. "Her injuries were my fault, and I do apologize for what happened," he said. "I know I didn't try to kill her, but I'm sorry for what did occur." But for many in that room, his words rang hollow. To think that he could inflict so much trauma and then simply say, "sorry," as if that might somehow erase it all, it was infuriating. Rachel had fought for her life. She had carried the physical and emotional scars of that night, and no apology could undo that. As for Tracy's case, investigators were forced to admit the painful truth. They likely weren't going to get justice for her. Everyone involved had a strong suspicion about who was responsible, but there simply wasn't enough evidence to bring formal charges. James remained the prime suspect, but suspicion alone isn't enough for a conviction. After the trial, Tracy's father, Joseph, spoke publicly. "If there's any comfort," he said, "it's that he's behind bars and won't destroy another family like he destroyed ours." Then, in a twist that stunned everyone, James appealed his conviction in 2015. He claimed that his attorneys had pressured him into waiving his right to a speedy trial. His appeal was granted, and a new hearing was held, but the result didn't change. James Hadaway remained sentenced to life in prison. 15 years have passed since Tracy was last seen leaving the Florida tap room, a place she knew and loved. No calls, no texts, no sightings, nothing. Her disappearance has left a gaping hole in the lives of her parents, Joseph and Liz, who continue to fight for answers. They've lived with heartbreak, fear, and hope, often all at once. Joseph still struggles with guilt. He often thinks back to the night Tracy went out alone. In his heart, he believes that if he had been with her, things might have turned out differently. But this wasn't his fault. No one could have predicted what was going to happen. If blame belongs anywhere, it's with James. But without solid evidence, justice remains out of reach. Despite everything, the case is still open. Detective David Gray continues to follow up on every lead that comes in, no matter how small. The Ocasio family holds on to the hope that one day they'll know the truth, because no family should have to endure what they have. Missing persons cases are especially cruel. It's not just the lack of justice, it's the absence of answers, the constant uncertainty, the haunting feeling of not knowing. And when the person suspected of doing harm is already behind bars, but the victim's whereabouts remain a mystery, it's a cruel kind of limbo. In the end, it's a painful reminder that life can change in a single moment, and when it does, the consequences can last forever.